Hey everybody, in this video I'll be discussing the timing for resisting spells in Frostgrave 2nd edition. Hey everybody, I'm Alan with Bricks and Blocks Gaming, the channel that plays tabletop games using toy bricks and blocks and discusses the rules and strategies that build the foundation for those games. Resisting spells is an important part of spell casting in the game of Frostgrave, but not every spell can be resisted, and those that can don't all follow the same rules for when the resistance rule is made. In this video, I'll be taking a look at which spells can be resisted, how to make a resistance rule, one-time effect spells, ongoing effect spells, timing of resistance rules with ongoing effect spells, and if you stick around till the end, I'll be giving away some strategy tips for how to best take advantage of the timing for each of these resistance rules. So let's get to the bricks and blocks of resisting spells in Frostgrave 2nd edition. The most important part about spell resistance is knowing which spells allow you to make a resistance roll. Only those spells that specifically state in their description that they can be resisted are allowed to make a resistance roll, which means that attack spells and battlefield manipulation spells can't be resisted. And the spells that can be resisted are those that hinder your opponent's figures by affecting their stats, their rolls, their actions, or takes control of them. There are a few outlying spells I need to mention. Beauty is a spell that the caster casts on themselves, and it requires the opponent to make a will roll anytime they attempt various actions against the spellcaster. And there's no other spell in the game that has an ability like this. Two spells that can't be resisted but seem like they would fall into the category of resistible spells are Decay and Glow. Decay actually targets a weapon, not a figure, which is perhaps why it doesn't include any language about a resistance roll, even though it can severely cripple a soldier for the entirety of the game. Glow is the only spell in the game that you can cast on an opposing figure that has an ongoing negative effect that can never be resisted. When a spell calls for a resistance roll to be made, this is done by having the target roll a d20 and adding their will stat to it. If the final result is equal to or greater than the casting number of the spell after any empowerment or modifiers, like the apprentice's casting roll penalty, the spell is resisted. And don't forget about the casting roll minimum rule, which bumps the casting rolls of all successfully cast spells up to 14, which can make some easily cast spells harder to resist. Also, spellcasters are allowed to empower their resistance roll at the rate of 1 health for 1 point of increase to their roll. The spells that allow for a resistance roll can be split into two groups, those with immediate effects and those with ongoing effects. The immediate effect spells can be further split into spells that you always want to resist and spells that you might not want to resist. Banish, Destroy Undead, Planar Tear, and Steal Health all require an immediate resistance roll to resist, and I can't think of why you wouldn't want to resist these even if you could. The spell Strike Dead also requires an immediate resistance roll, but this one is unique because it's the only spell in the game that allows non-spellcasters to empower their will roll to resist it. The spells Blink, Suggestion, and Transpose are interesting because they can be used well on both friend or foe, and they all use the wording may be resisted, meaning you can actually choose not to resist these spells. Blink can be used to get your figure away from a threat or move your opponent further away. There are times when Suggestion can be just as useful on an allied soldier to force them to drop a treasure and move as it is to do that to an opponent. With Transpose, even if your opponent is moving your figure, there may be times when it's not that big of a deal if your figure ends up where they're moving them to, so you might choose not to resist it. The spell Fool's Gold would fit into this category of spells you might want to cast on your own figures. However, this spell specifically states the figure must make a resistance roll, So even if you want your figure to spontaneously drop their treasure, they are required to roll to try to fight off the effects of this spell. I want to talk about the spell Push here, because it falls into the category of spells that could be helpful or harmful to the target. I've seen a lot of people ask about this spell online, and yes, you are allowed to use it on your own figures if you want. This spell doesn't allow a normal will roll to resist. Rather, after the spell is successfully cast, the caster makes another roll, a +10 attack roll, and the target makes a fight roll like normal in combat to essentially resist the effects of the spell. So if you want to push one of your figures toward a treasure token, you can try it, but they might not budge if they roll high enough. The spells I've mentioned so far have effects that occur right after they're cast, but some spells have effects that last until they're either resisted or dispelled. First, I want to mention a hybrid spell that has both an immediate effect and an ongoing effect. Petrify allows an immediate roll to resist the spell, and if failed, the target loses both their actions on their next activation. They also get -3 to their fight and can't have leap cast on them, but this part lasts until they make a move action. So the secondary penalty doesn't automatically wear off after their next activation, and they don't get any further rolls to resist the effects, meaning it has the potential to last a long time if the figure is tied up in combat. Moving completely to the ongoing effect spells, I'll start with those that grant you control of other figures. 4 of these, Control Animal, Control Construct, Control Demon, and Control Undead, can only target specific types of figures, while Mind Control can target anything except for spellcasters and creatures that specifically say they can't be controlled. And while Mind Control is arguably the best of these 5 spells, the other 4 have an important advantage. All 5 of the control spells allow an immediate roll to resist the spell, and Mind Control allows additional resistance rolls after the figure has completed each of their future activations. With the other 4 spells, though, if that immediate roll is failed, the figure gets no further resistance rolls and stays with the caster for the rest of the battle, unless the spell is cancelled by another effect. The remaining resistible spells, Blinding Light, Curse, Furious Quill, Slow, and Plague of Insects, need to be looked at individually because they all have different rules, some not even allowing immediate attempts to resist them. I mentioned a moment ago that Mind Control allows an immediate resistance roll and then future resistance rolls after they've finished each of their activations. Blinding Light gets an immediate resistance roll, but then its future rolls are made at the end of each turn. Curse gets no immediate roll, but the figure can attempt to resist again at the end of each turn. Furious Quill gets no immediate roll, but resistance can be attempted at the start of the figure's activations. Slow and Plague of Insects are 2 other spells that get no immediate roll, but the figure can't even try to resist them until after they've finished their activations. I'll add that this is a change for Plague of Insects from the first edition. In the original book, that spell functioned like Furious Quill, granting a resistance roll at the start of each activation instead of after they've finished their activation. Just to clarify some possible confusion with Plague of Insects and Mind Control, the exact wording for these spells says after the figure activates. An argument could be made that this means after their activation is declared, not after they've finished their activation. So I checked with the author Joseph McCullough, and he confirmed that resistance rolls for both these spells are done after all their actions are complete. The different timings for when resistance rolls can be made mean there are different strategies that work best for each of these spells based around that timing. Spells with end of the turn resistance rolls, Blinding Light and Curse, are best on figures that haven't activated yet, as these spells affect them during their activation and again during the soldier phase when you might really be able to take advantage of the affected figure's misfortune. Spells that have resistance rules connected to the target's activation, Furious Quill and Plague of Insects, are best on figures that have already activated, so you can take advantage of their compromised state for the rest of the turn and possibly into the next turn before they even get a chance to resist it. All the control spells are usually best on a figure that hasn't activated, and even better if cast after a few of the opposing figures have activated. This is because it can really mess with your opponent's strategy if they have less options available to deal with this unexpected threat, especially if the figure is within attacking range of a spellcaster that has already activated and can't run or send in a chump as a human shield. With Slow, since it doesn't affect a figure's stats, there's no real advantage to casting this spell before or after the target has activated. It'll still do the same thing the next time the target activates. As you can see, there's no easy answer for when resistance rolls are made. So make sure you read your spell descriptions carefully so that you and your opponent can use the spells of Frostgrave correctly and efficiently. I want to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to click like, add a comment, or subscribe so you can keep up with all the content that I'm releasing. And with that, I'm Alan with Bricks and Blocks Gaming, and I'll see you on the next video.